AfterStory is arguably what made Clannad. Instead of ending at graduation and disappearing into the sea of similar Japanese media, Clannad's unlockable final route, AfterStory, continues Nagisa no Kazuki's journey as they move into adulthood, struggling with jobs, living alone, and eventually parenthood at loss. It's no surprise that KyoAni's anime adaptation covered this content in its second season, also titled AfterStory, which delivered some of the studio's best work, crafting emotional moments to go down in anime history and delivering on a season that's remained relevant even a decade and a half later. This video is not about any of that, because confusingly, the first 9 episodes of Clannad AfterStory, the anime, don't contain any content from the VN's AfterStory route, instead covering additional normal routes the first season didn't have time to pick up. There's a method to the anime's madness, but this means we're still stuck in the high school status quo for the first third of the season, but that doesn't make KyoAni's adaptational approach any less interesting. Because if you've gotten used to the side route template the first season introduced with Fuko and Katomi route, be prepared to be surprised, because these side routes are odd, notably only getting 2 or 3 episodes apiece instead of a full 5 like the Luckier Girls. We start off reintroducing the cast with Baseball route, a fan favorite optional side route, before jumping into Misae, then Yukine route, plus some Komura content to top it off. One of these routes is absolutely massacred by the anime's adaptation, and another is largely made up of anime original content. For now, I'll leave you to guess which is which. So before we start the timer for the speedrun, let's refresh ourselves on the anime's current situation. Nagisa route has nearly concluded, with the Founders Festival and the couple now dating, pausing just before Nagisa falls sick during their VN walk home. You'd think that development would switch up the status quo, especially given how long the anime has waited to finally pair them up, but you'd be wrong. Now that the anime pair's relationship is caught up to the VN, the relationship is effectively blocked from progressing further until we catch back up to the VN in episode 9, meaning the anime pair feel even less like a couple now than during the first season's side arcs, where they were at least allowed to flirt a bit. So what VN route is the anime starting off with then? If you've heard of Baseball route, it's likely because it's recommended as a starting point for new VN players, due to introducing most of the cast without locking into a single route. It's an ironic recommendation given how hard the route is to discover naturally, almost being a secret ending, since it requires knowing the exact choices to meet but not lock into multiple routes. Be too harsh and explicitly reject the girls and you'll instead discover another of the game's secret endings, an extremely homophobic gag ending in Sunohara route, where the game decides that rejecting so many potential waifus can only mean Okazuki is gay for Suno. In the VN, if you missed every possibility to lock into a route, Suno will eventually induct Okazuki into a cross-town elimination laser tag game, Kyo and potentially Tomoyo included. Okazuki coldly takes down Suno, followed by strategically outsmarting Tomoyo then Kyo, before being drawn into a one-on-one duel with a mysterious figure who's gone as far as to rappel down the roof and attack Okazuki in class. The match ends in a dramatic draw as a mysterious attacker is revealed as, who else but Akio, who hasn't yet met Okazuki in this route. VN Akio's try-hard permadeath laser tag doesn't show up in the anime or any of the main VN routes, but is also revealed if you get locked in the sports shed with him during Yukine route. And normally, that's it. Okazuki goes home to ruminate on his unchanging life, and you're unceremoniously kicked out to the loading screen. But, and this is why I characterize it as a secret ending, if you discover enough of the cast, the content unexpectedly continues, with Akio ambushing Okazuki to recruit him for the titular baseball game. The anime sets this match up differently, needing to also kick off an entire new season. This means our first shot is Okazuki in a field of flowers with his father? If you complete the anime, I guarantee you immediately recognize what this is setting up, and also you've entirely forgotten this how the season began. It's a fantastic way to bookend the entire season's themes of fatherhood, or would be if it weren't 18 episodes to its payoff and 9 whole episodes before you even reach any after-story content. We then get a more expected reminder of the status quo, with Okazuki and Nagisa watching Akio play baseball with the neighborhood kids, his dramatic home run ruined by the sound of shattering glass. Humorously, Akio out in the VN reveals her neighbors don't actually mind these antics, given how much a pillar of the community Akio is. It's as the expanded Furukawa family is eating dinner that anime Akio introduces the baseball match, and as in the VN explains their town team is being outmatched by their rival shopping district. In both versions, Akio expresses he's impressed with Okazuki so wants his help, referencing the teamwork the drama club displayed in the anime, when in the VN he drops the insane revelation that Okazuki's laser tag tie was the first time he's ever failed to win a match of skill. Surprisingly, his words light a fire in the otherwise apathetic VN Okazuki, while in the anime, Akio leverages Okazuki's position as Nagisa's boyfriend to recruit his help. I guess unlike their VN counterparts, the anime pair hasn't tried to hide their new relationship. We next get a recruitment montage in both versions. Suno's easily buttered up, and VN Kyo and Tomoyo are quick to join due to having lost the laser tag game, and thus having to do what the winner, Akio, asks. VN Okazuki promising to help teach Tomoyo baseball also helps seal the deal for her, complete with Okazuki totally failing to know she has a thing for him now. Anime Tomoyo instead will only join if Misae does, who VN Okazuki similarly thinks of as a potential recruit. In the VN they first try and fail to recruit Fuko, who of course has already been exercised in the anime's timeline, leading to anime Okazuki instead securing Katomi's support, who calls back to Tomoyo's earlier baseball challenge as inspiration. In the VN the next recruit Misae thanks to Tomoyo's support, before VN Okazuki realizes they've only been recruiting girls and thinks of Yoshino, who in the VN Okazuki has run into before and helped with the repair work, before he and Suna harassed him claiming to be in a band. Our anime crew instead runs into Yoshino on their way to recruit Misae, and starts a fan call to get his attention. This Yoshino call is escalated further in the VN, with Okazuki and Suno calling aimlessly into the evening in an attempt to reach him, which somehow works. In either case, Okazuki secures his support with a sob story about making high school memories. Misae is then similarly recruited in the anime, before Mei is easily grabbed as the final member, taking the overnight bus when Sunohara reveals her idol Yoshino is going to be there. The anime takes a moment to smartly remind us of its larger ongoing conflict, with Nagisa suggesting they should invite Okazuki's dad to the game as well, reminding us of their strained relationship and contrasting the happy flashback we saw in the episode's opening shot. Okazuki dismisses the idea, clearly uncomfortable, the whole conversation mirroring a cut discussion Nagisa and Okazuki have on their way to school, soon after he moves into her house in her VN route. But now it's time for the second dramatic sports game of the series. The VN lampshades its reuse of the schoolyard background, and with no Kotomi, Fuko arrives after all as the final member. Given VN Kotomi is entirely restricted to her route, never even showing up as an option in the basketball game or the supply closet, it's appreciated to see her sub in here. As with Fuko arc complete, it'd be a little anticlimactic if she rejoined the group now. This is doubly true since the anime also adds Ibuki appearing to support Yoshino, given in this timeline they're now married. Although technically Yoshino is still Ibuki's fiancé at this point in the VN and would have seen Fuko in the hospital, so it's a bit of a plot hole regardless, so... Not that anyone playing this as their first route would ever catch that. With the wider cast gathered, we now get some fun reveals in both versions, including Misae and Yoshino recognizing each other. The VN gives them a fun, immediately antagonistic dynamic, while the anime additionally reveals Misae knows Ibuki as we see the two catch up. Given the prior routes, and their prior releases, it's no surprise Key are big sports fans, and we get surprisingly involved play-by-play of each inning in the VN, significantly cut down in the anime. In both versions, the team's women put on a strong performance, the men more harshly mocked in the VN for failing to get any good hits. And despite being a mishmash team, the VN makes it clear they have a solid defense, with Akio providing professional-level pitching and the trio of athletic girls delivering killer passes. Inmate Kotomi also gets a cute moment applying her analytical brain at bat, a gag taken from when she attempted the claw machine in the VN during her route. Fuko similarly gets some cute moments in the VN, being humorously reliable at accidentally catching fly balls. But disaster strikes as Akio is hit in the leg by a thrown bat, leaving him unable to pitch. In the VN, everyone wants to give up, until Akio in both versions promotes Nagisa, who previously had been watching, explaining that an experienced batter will hit worse against a total newbie compared to an amateur. Innings go by with the VN depicting them tying it up and the game going into overtime. The Furukawa Bakers only need one more run to win. Okazuki has been bunting all game due to his shoulder, a strategy Akio begrudgingly accepts. But now, in the critical moment, Akio encourages him to swing for broke. In the anime he mentions they're not in a position for a squeeze play, but it's more interesting in the VN where it's technically the perfect time for a bunt. But Akio encourages him regardless, which combined with Okazuki not wanting Suno to follow up with the game-winning hit, encourages him to finally swing. But before we see the outcome, both versions pull an Evangelion and cut to after the game's conclusion. The anime has an after-party for the entire crew, stealthily setting up Mei's upcoming route as Suno reminds us he's still under the impression that Sana is Nagisa's sister. In the VN, we instead get an epilogue from Okazuki, explaining how everyone went their separate ways after the game and graduating, but even now he'll encourage himself by thinking back to that magical game, before both versions jump back to Okazuki's game-winning swing. Again proving they're sports fans, we get a special version of the credits in the VN with each player's stats, while the anime hints at the nature of the light balls as we match cut from Okazuki's home run to a ball of light appearing in the illusionary world. If there's any connection between this and the next couple side routes, it's this: the focus on hinting at and eventually explaining the balls of light we've seen appearing in both versions, in the real and illusionary worlds. In the VN, you've been collecting them in the title screen after each good ending, which mechanically hints at their nature, while the anime here hints at their connection to the illusionary world. And with that, we're one episode and one route down. It's a fun ride in both versions, with the VN giving some great banter between characters that don't otherwise interact. Misae angrily complaining about Akio treating her like a young girl is particularly humorous, and the writers are able to provide some legitimately compelling sports action. In some ways, it's more fun playing through once you've already experienced all the individual routes, like a crossover episode. Offhand, I can see why it's recommended as a starting point, but honestly, I'm not sure which route you start with particularly matters. In the anime, it instead serves as a great low-stakes episode to reintroduce the cast and themes important to the upcoming routes in case it's been a while since the viewer's seen the first season, weaving necessary reminders of Okazuki's family situation and uncertainty towards the future into the lightweight sport shenanigans. And with introductions done, who first to focus on but the most side of side characters? Sunohara. Because despite being called Mei route, its main focus is on our blonde-haired blockhead and his relationship with both his sister and Okazuki. The VN even labels it as the Sunohara siblings route. Given Sunohara's accompanied the cast for side route after side route, it's appreciated to see him finally get some focus. Despite only having 3 episodes to work with, it's one of the anime's strongest adaptations. But before we dive into Suno shenanigans, the anime revisits the illusionary world, showing the girl and robot collecting junk. This parallel narrative effectively concluded with Nagisa's play in the VN, while the anime narrative lags behind. For the start of its second season though, the anime slingshots us back further, starting us off with largely inconsequential moments like this one, which occurred way back at the start of Nagisa's route in the VN, reminding us that this parallel narrative exists before catching back up to the more serious plot points. The episode continues with some banter between our Okazuki-Sunohara duo taken from the later part of Kamen Route, which actually gives the player a whole set of options for how to mess with Suno, reminding returning watchers of the pair's dynamic. Mei's VN route begins with the choice to answer the phone for Sunohara when she calls, so long as you don't walk into any other route until she arrives. If you end up on Nagisa's route in the meantime, she'll still show up, but instead causes trouble for the new couple, which the anime already adapted in its first season's OVA. This means the kickoff our anime route may needs to make yet another visit, meaning unlike the VN, she's quite the frequent flyer. We're up to, 5 separate visits in this continuity? It's a little redundant, but the anime smartly remixes the motivation for her visit into its unique continuity and themes of an uncertain future, as instead of being concerned about her brother fitting in at school like in the VN, Anime Mei mentions being concerned that her brother has no future plans despite being so close to graduation, foreshadowing AfterStory and reminding us that her time at this school will soon come to a close. By the way, Suno wants to find an easy way to ease his sister's concerns. Success in academics, club activities, or romance are all floated in the VN, before Okazuki points out that getting a GF is the only option that can be realistically accomplished in a day. This is instead Sunohara's idea in the anime, inspired by Okazuki's successful relationship, but that doesn't stop our prankster protagonist from enthusiastically encouraging it. Like with finding a third basketball member, there's another mini-game in the VN, with multiple choices for who to ask to fill in as a fake GF based on your prior actions, a couple of which the anime adapts concurrently. The anime kicks off with the Ro option, who drops a surprisingly cold line in the VN as they explain the situation, suggesting Mei would be happier if Sunohara just lived properly to begin with. It's bold for her, but in both versions when she realizes they're asking her to fill in, she breaks down. Anime Suno getting a line more suited for the VN, where he comments her tears just make him want to force her more. For once, his VN counterpart seems more apologetic, before both are beaten down by Kyo, which the anime uses to transition to the Kyo option. In the anime, Suno gasses himself up and mentions he might have a chance with Kyo, while his VN counterpart is much smarter and initially refuses when Okazuki suggests it, before in both versions she overhears their chatter and lays down more hurt. Next up for adaptation is Tomoyo, where Suno, clearly suffering from combo-created PTSD, convinces himself to approach based on an imagined scenario where they're sworn rivals, an illusion instigated by Okazuki in the VN. This confrontation occurs as she leaves a class in the VN, changed to the schoolyard in the anime, but with some encouragement from Okazuki she begrudgingly goes along with Suno's script, misinterpreting it as him picking another fight and sending him flying. We also get a cute continuity detail in the anime where Nagisa and Tomoyo briefly discuss the prior episode's baseball match. Having suffered enough abuse for one day, Anime Suno moves on to an anime original option with Kotomi, who immediately accepts before her ear-rending violin marks her as a skip. We then get another anime exclusive with Yukine, which additionally sets up the nature of her upcoming route as a gruff-looking delinquent appears and provides Suno with his third beating of the day for making such an indecent request of Big Sis Yukine. The anime has been surprisingly thorough in adapting these options, but again of course cuts the Fuko choice, a fortunate decision given the VN has Suno literally grabbing Fuko and kidnapping her to be his date. Less fortunate is the anime's obvious decision to remove the Nagisa choice, which provides the cutest content, as our lonely only child gushes so much about how great it must be to have a sibling that our brain-dead duo totally forgets what we're trying to ask her about in the first place. In other cases, followed by a sequence where Okazuki, like when Sunohara was trying to seduce Tomoyo, feeds Suno lines trying to pick up rando girls, instructions which of course backfire and paint him as a seedy individual. The VN continues with another attempt on your chosen girl after school, which does not go well for Suno in any permutation, before like in the anime Sanae appears and offers her help. VN Sanae's familiarity with Okazuki can vary wildly depending on how far you started down Nagisa route, from Sanae recognizing Okazuki and thanking him for the help he's provided her daughter, to less believably offering to help just because she recognizes the uniforms and assumes the pair are Nagisa's friends. In either case, she insists they explain what's wrong and volunteers herself for the role, despite Okazuki's protest in both versions. The VN does justify this admittedly odd action later on, while in the anime she comments that of course she's willing to help Mei's brother, which would make sense if not for the fact the whole request was an attempt to deceive that same sister. And this of course brings up the anime's second problem. Sanae's met both Sunohara and Mei multiple times. But unbeknownst to a casual watcher, the groundwork for justifying this has been laid as early as episode 6, where during Fuko route, Okazuki revealing Sanae as Nagisa's mom is changed to him letting Suno continue to assume she's Nagisa's sister, a belief he maintains in both versions. Mei failing to recognize Sanae is significantly less believable, especially given she's again staying with the Furukawas, but the anime will pay lip service to this by having Sanae wear a disguise. Next up is Sanae and Suno's practice date. Mei hasn't arrived yet in the VM, but the anime ropes her in now by adding Suno telling Mei about his new GF, and her asking to be introduced, plus some fan service of Sanae trying on outfits. And while Nagisa isn't allowed to do anything particularly impactful during these arcs, her inclusion here bemoaning that her mom is going on a date with her classmate does immediately increase my enjoyment of the route by about 20%. Anime Sanae also provides some justification for her help here, explaining she knows Suno's earnestness during the prior baseball game and feels he just needs a push to get on the right path. We get a slightly different explanation of her motivation later on in the VN, but it's a cool change to help reinforce the anime's shared continuity. In either case we get the practice date, with Suno humorously running over to Okazuki to provide real-time commentary in both versions. Single VN Okazuki legitimately sulks in jealousy while he watches on, even his anime version is somewhat bewitched, Nagisa accusing him of falling for her mom as well. Mei arrives just afterwards in the VN as Okazuki hangs out alone in Suno's dorm. Since like the anime, this is their first meeting in this VN timeline, we get an extended back and forth, similar to during her arrival on Nagisa route. Mei's infatuation with the city is also emphasized more in the VN, a cute characterizing detail that clues us on to just how rural the Sunohara's upbringing must have been, and so it explains why they're so close. Eventually Mei drops the same question as when visiting a Nagisa route, asking how her brother's doing. For maybe the first time ever, VN Okazuki actually covers for Suno, lying about him being on a date, which Suno similarly brags about upon returning. VN Okazuki and Mei leave the dorms together. She further explains Suno's history of short-lived romances. Yes, that means if you're forever single, Sunohara has technically had more romantic success than you. It's also worth mentioning that there are unfortunately some flirty elements between Mei and Okazuki in the VN. It never crosses a line, but it is uncomfortable considering the significant age gap, especially given that with no Nagisa around, VN Mei ends up slumming it at Okazuki's house. Mei then proves herself the total opposite of her brother, as well as Clannad's ultimate neckbeard fantasy, but not just fulfilling the basic female Clannad character role of immediately cooking for the household, but also cleans the house unprompted and even feeds Okazuki the next morning when he sleeps in. The next morning, Mei leaves to spy on Suno's date, wanting to confirm he's not lying, an excursion to Okazuki and anime Nagisa accompany. Despite this route ostensibly being about him, poor VN Suno is a single character model, resulting in them briefly lampshading his choice to show up in his school uniform, upgraded to a flamboyant white tux courtesy of KyoAni. Sanae then appears, using her normal name and outfit in the VN, while in the anime she's the one to pull up in a school uniform in a familiar pseudonym. Anime Mei's suspicious, but buys it, and Nagisa even calls Okazuki out for blushing. For her college genetics must be god tier, although the VN at least refers to her as a older woman, instead of Mei buying that she's 17. But Mei doesn't react how her brother hoped in either version, instead breaking down in pity that such a beautiful woman is stuck with her failure of her brother. VN Okazuki's about to ditch now that Mei successfully confirmed Suno's claim, but she grabs his arm and insists on following along as a double date, so she isn't left jealous. The anime trio similarly follows beyond Suno's trash fire of a date, including him visiting an arcade and feeling an audition to be the fifth KyoAni. Hammed up more in the VN as Okazuki describes arcades as a place that holds a dark allure for men, only the scummiest of which would force their date to visit. A great moment of cross-out irony considering he goes there with Nagisa during their route. The day wanes, but Suno insists on continuing the date, refusing to stop even as they pass a playground where a young girl is being bullied. Badass anime Nagisa is the first to move, an action Okazuki similarly takes in the VN, but either way Mei stops them, wanting to see if her brother will step in and improve his character, becoming increasingly distraught when he doesn't. Finally, VN Sanae jumps in, changes the anime to the girl's older brother, further highlighting the parallels between these kids and the Sunohara siblings. Either way, the kids are lost, and despite Suno's insistence they need to get back to the date, Sanae spends the rest of the evening personally helping them find their way back home. Suno pathetically sulks in response, but Sanae agrees to another date to make up for it, attempting to turn it into a lesson about needing to help others, which Suno entirely ignores in his excitement. Even the next day at school, Suno's too psyched thinking about a second date to notice Okazuki's attempt to refocus on Sanae's lesson and Mei's feelings. Appropriately, the anime changes V and Suno's line promising to introduce Okazuki to Sanae's friends once he seduces her for real, to claim they'll be bros once he and Okazuki marry their respective Furukawas. Okazuki is clearly pissed by Suno's misplaced obsession. Further does Suno handwaves his sister's concern when the gang returns to his dorm, claiming she never cared about him and just wanted an excuse to visit the big city. Mei is upset as well, but takes advantage of Suno's affront by lying that he's right, that she actually came to meet up with an older lover she's been exchanging letters with, unsettledly dropping as many red flags as humanly possible. The VN's more explicit as usual, but even in the anime it's pretty clear what she's insinuating. This manages to get through even Suno's thick skull, making him particularly upset in the VN, but he refuses to chase after Mei as she leaves, even at Okazuki's insistence, in case Sanae calls and he misses it. Anime Nagisa is of course the first to chase after, followed by Okazuki, who in the VN first realizes Mei was lying when he notices she made no effort to escape the dorms. Mei's face falls when she realizes it wasn't her bro coming after her, accompanied with some beautifully expressive animation in the anime, before explaining she wanted her brother to prove he still cared for her, to chase after her, scold her, even hit her, but he didn't do anything. They then return to Okazuki's home, obviously updated to the bakery in the anime, to debrief, with Mei explaining how she was bullied as a child, but Sunohara would always appear to save her. Over time, not just her, but his fellow soccer teammates grew to rely on him, nothing like the unreliable person he is now. Mei then honestly asks if Sanae is actually Suno's GF, and Okazuki reveals the truth. Although she's unbelievably stone-faced in the anime, given in this version the reveal isn't just that it was a lie, but that it was her friend's mom. V and Okazuki encounters Suno the next day. It's clear he is worried about Mei, his eyes bloodshot from a lack of sleep, but still he refuses to do anything but fantasize about his upcoming date, leading to a disgusted Okazuki leaving and running into Mei. The anime instead has the group prepping Sanae for her upcoming date, before Akio ambushes them asking what's up. Mei lies that they're rehearsing for a new play, successfully capturing Akio's theatrical interest and leaving Nagisa behind to discuss the details of the play with him as Mei, Okazuki, and Sanae's ass escape. By the time they catch up, Sanae and Suno have already left on their date. Nice guy anime Okazuki feels bad Mei spending all her time worrying and suggests they spend a day on the town instead. V and Okazuki instead jokes Mei's worry is wasted on Suno and she should become his sister instead. She turns him down, but they agree on a mock date so she can better lie to Sunohara. Unlike the clearly platonic anime outing, the VN excursion is much flirtier, with some genuine date vibes as the two play off each other and hold hands, but fortunately never crosses a line as anything more than playful. And what better way to start than the ultimate Dijin fantasy, as in both versions Okazuki argues about if Mei should call him Oni-chan or not, to the disgust of passing classmates, changed to a shell-shocked Kotomi and the Fujibayashis in the anime. They then proceed on to a shared crepe and a photo booth, as well as visiting a music store and a 100-yen shop in the VN. The VN continues to endearingly emphasize Mei's rural roots, as she excitedly explores otherwise mundane city features like the 100-yen store, and has to rely on Okazuki for how to operate a photo booth. There's also a surprisingly meaty cameo available in the VN if you've previously met Yoshino, where Okazuki can tell Mei about their encounter and the pair can actually track him down. Like in the baseball route, she's so nervous she can barely speak, but eventually stammers out how much his music means to her, words of things Yoshino accepts even if he's not that person anymore. Our anime date ends with Mei clinging to Okazuki's arm in a final photo booth picture, escalated in the VN to her agreeing to Okazuki's joking suggestion they should kiss. But just as she gives him a kiss on the cheek, who should appear out of the blue but her blonde-haired brother. V and Okazuki admits the situation is legitimately sus now, with no good explanation for what he was doing with Mei. But as we know, anime Okazuki is loyal for Nagisa, and is entirely unbothered by Suno's misunderstanding before in both versions he realizes he can copy Mei and lie to goad Suno on instead, telling Suno he's the older man Mei is dating. In the anime he of course also has to mention that he broke up with Nagisa, while his taunting in the VN is again more explicit, including saying Mei stayed over with him last night, which technically isn't untrue. Anyway, Suno seems mostly shocked, but in the VN, he's mad. It seems like he's about to sock Okazuki and again marry Mei Okazuki wants him to, but he doesn't, and impotently lets the two walk away. Again proving his loyalty, the anime next is Okazuki explaining the prior events to Nagisa, before failing to convince Mei she needs to return home, something he overhears her parents similarly trying the next morning in the VN. We ask to get a fantastic, but understandably cut sequence in the VN where Okazuki returns to school and hangs out with a bunch of randos for lunch, but quickly becomes bored and realizes just how much Sunohara's company has helped him stay entertained at school. As he leaves, he runs into Mei, who in both versions proposes a desperate solution to help her brother, have him rejoin the soccer club. It's a motivation that makes slightly more sense in the VN, given they don't even have a full semester of school left in the anime's timeline, but the anime does add a nice sense of shared history as we see Kyo agree the next day that rejoining the club is impossible for Suno. Given even the viewer doesn't have full context on what got Suno booted from the club, this shared understanding between Kyo, Sunohara, and Okazuki reinforces their shared past and reminds us these characters had lives before the start of the show. Kotomi's bully accusation also pays off for once, as the group agrees her impression might be correct this time. In either case, Mei insists on asking the soccer team despite Okazuki's warning, with him and Anime Nagisa volunteering to accompany her. In the VN they start with the coach, who despite being an adult is a total dick to Mei, but agrees to consider letting Suno rejoin if the team's on board. In the anime they go straight to the club members, who in both cases are absolutely awful despite Mei's pleas. Even Anime Nagisa catches some strays, which he holds Okazuki back, who similarly restrains his anger for Mei's sake in the VN. The anime then pivots into another scheduled Yukine inclusion, as the gang describes the problem to her. Notably, Anime Okazuki's explanation of why Suno got kicked out differs greatly from the VN version we hear in this and Komura route. Anime Suno had a more straightforwardly sympathetic conflict with the team's strict hierarchical structure, but as we come to learn, he was the one who started the fight in the VN. His rural roots made him feel like he didn't belong and wouldn't amount to anything, lashing out in an attempt to get expelled and accept what he saw as his fate. It's a far more nuanced explanation, and provides more emotional depth than Anime Suno ever gets. But the anime's response is to flex his genius remixing talents, as this Yukine visit isn't a mere cameo. It both sets up her route and adds nuance to the VN's original conflict. Yukine calls Mei out for fixating on the past, so Suno wouldn't be happy rejoining the soccer club, an obvious contradiction in Mei's desperate plan the VN largely ignores. Instead, Yukine reveals she had an older brother she initially didn't get along with, but over time came to appreciate his good traits, reassuring Mei that Suno does have positive traits, he just needs an opportunity to show them. Overall, it's a fantastic addition that not only foreshadows the conflict of Yukine route, but manages to emotionally and thematically connect what were originally separate sibling-focused stories. In both versions, we next see Suno back at class. Okazuki asks if he knows what Mei is doing, but Suno blows him off, causing Okazuki to grab him and nearly come to blows, Okazuki telling him to ask a soccer club member before he walks off. Here, the VN inserts an additional meeting with Sanae, where Okazuki reveals the truth to her. Her contribution to the anime route is effectively done at this point, but this last VN meeting is what reveals her motivation for going along with the boys' ludicrous request. When Okazuki arrives, he's surprised to see her lecturing the gang of boys that were bullying the young girl they saved, and Okazuki realizes that she's doing the same with him and Suno. She was above their level from the start, and was helping so she could teach them to be better. It's a great reveal that gives more gravitas to Sanae's explanation than the flimsy justification in the anime, as well as arguably foreshadowing Sanae's motivation with Ushio much later in AfterStory. Okazuki explains everything to Sanae, expressing that their plan to put Mei at ease backfired, but Sanae contradicts him, claiming Suno has been worried about Mei and Okazuki just needs to trust his friend. The anime rejoins the plot as Okazuki and Mei return to the soccer club a second time. Anime Okazuki is aware it might come to blows and tries to dissuade Nagisa from coming, but she insists. V and Okazuki remains stoic despite their continued abuse, holding back for Mei's sake, but he goes further in the anime and actually lowers his head, something his V and pride prevents him from doing, and causing the boys to know he's changed. In either case, the club agrees to hear them out if they act as ball boys, intentionally abusing the helpers by kicking balls far into the outfield and aiming them at Mei, highlighting Mei's resolve as she refuses to back down. The duration and cruelty is extended further in the VN, and in both versions when they plead their case at the end of practice, the club captain reveals he had no intention of hearing them out, the club members all expressing their disdain for Sunohara. But what finally gets made a break is the club revealing Sunohara knows they're doing this, explaining he asked their captain about it, changed the more cowardly choice of interrogating a newbie in the anime. They grab her, taunting her tearful insistence her brother will save her, and Okazuki decides it's time to intervene. V and Okazuki's internal thoughts reveal he's a surprisingly smart fighter, sizing his opponents up and mentally preparing before engaging. But either way, he doesn't get a chance, as Sunohara suddenly charges in, yelling to stop making his sister cry. For a romance anime, KyoAni's brief fight animation is surprisingly peak, and Okazuki jumps into the fray after reassuring Mei and the VN that her big bro isn't gonna lose. We next see Okazuki and Suno lying in the soccer field, rain pouring down, not sure if they won, but agreeing they didn't lose. Okazuki calls Suno an idiot and insists he apologize to Mei, more pointedly accusing Sunohara of this all being his fault for being a worthless brother in the VN. They decide to fight, Okazuki taking the lead but faltering when Suno reveals he didn't intervene because it was him, because he was entrusting Mei to Okazuki as her boyfriend. It's a nice sentiment to cap off the route. Until you remember Suno also didn't interfere for a whole day and a half after Mei dropped a Costco-sized delivery of red flags, but before he saw her with Okazuki. But let's just brush that under the rug as Mei breaks up the fight and runs into Suno's arms. Assisted in the anime Suno's confusion at Nagisa being there as well. The two anime pairs sit in the rain, while loner V and Okazuki walks off, leaving the siblings behind. The VN cuts to the next day, with Okazuki's bruised and bandaged face earning him looks from his classmates, as well as revealing the soccer club was so thoroughly whipped they didn't tell anyone about the fight. Sunohara enters the classroom, face equally beaten, although sadly the VN can't afford an alternate portrait even here, and the two break out in uncontrollable laughter at each other's face, a confrontation that occurs in the anime as the two bump into each other on the way to school. The VN has an extended conclusion where Sunohara provides some genuinely insightful context into the situation that caused him to get kicked out of the club, which I mentioned previously, as well as hypothesizing that Komura introduced the two of them to stop them from dropping out. We then wrap up the route with Mei preparing to leave, a conversation changed to a letter from Mei in the anime, where she expresses her envy over the boys' close friendship, and Sunohara encourages her to find similar friends at school, since friends from school are friends for life. Our epilogue in both versions is Sunohara working up the courage to ask Sanae to marry him at the bakery, assisted by Okazuki's knowing encouragement, before learning the truth and getting one last beating to cap Suno's route, conclude with a final image of the two bros' first fateful meeting in both versions. Despite having only 3 episodes, in my opinion this is one of the better adapted side routes across both seasons. It helps that the plot is a little simpler than the first season side routes, and with Mei and Sunohara already introduced, the anime is able to skip over much of the required setup. It's a solid adaptation that puts the second season's improved animation on full display, even managing to add additional setup and thematic connections to upcoming routes. Actually, now that I think of it, it's weird how many routes in Clannad focus on the relationship between siblings as a plot point, but I guess you're not allowed to have more than one brother or sister in the Clannad universe? Anyways, it's a solid example of how Clannad's focus on family doesn't necessarily have to be the romantic kind, although I also have to confess that I do enjoy Mei and Okazuki's dynamic in the VN. Despite some uncomfortable moments, it never crosses a line, and seeing Okazuki become like a second brother Mei can depend on is a heartwarming progression, something the anime loses out on due to its shorter time frame and Nagisa's inclusion. On the flip side, as I've previously criticized, Okazuki's harsh treatment of Sunohara throughout the VN somewhat undercuts the emotional impact of this VN route. I know Clan uses slapstick humor, but man, Okazuki is just downright cruel to Suno whenever it suits him. Suno's also sleazier throughout the VN, so it's not like he doesn't deserve it, but it makes it less believable when this route suddenly tries to frame it as an emotional friendship. Regardless, for such a persistently present side character, it's nice for Sunohara to finally get the focus for once, although with some of his antics in this route, I'm not sure if he comes off as more or less likable after all is said and done. Misae route is weird, and with both this and the next shot getting only 2 episodes apiece, it's also one of the most rushed arcs in the anime. However, these next 2 arcs also serve as important setup for AfterStory, as well as continue to reveal the nature of the balls of light which was hinted at in the baseball episode. So what makes Misae route so odd? Well, unlike most VN routes, it barely takes place at school, instead focusing on Okazuki's attempts to seduce Misae, an uncharacteristically assertive attitude compared to his approach to romance in the other routes, before the second half of the route transitions into an extended flashback from Misae's school days, before concluding in a totally separate VN route. Unsurprisingly, the anime doesn't adapt much from the route's first half, but even the flashback is rushed, hitting the major plot points, but being so unmemorable and unrelated to the larger plot, I wouldn't be surprised if any anime-onlys had forgotten about it. So imagine my surprise during my first playthrough, and this flashback managed to be some of the VN's best content, with maybe my favorite romantic pairing outside of our main couple, maybe because it doesn't involve V and Okazuki. It's a fantastically compelling, subtly tragic, self-contained arc butchered by the anime's shorter timeframe. Kotomi Route's adaptation might have rushed past that VN Route's great themes and character development, but we at least got some endearing character moments out of it. But here the anime doesn't have time for that either, which is a real shame. How we get to this flashback is of course also totally different in each version. In the VN you can run into Misae 3 times in the dorms, and have the choice to talk to her or not. Agreeing each time sees Okazuki suggesting she use more forceful methods of persuasion against the unruly dorm residents, with Suno reliably appearing for demonstration. This results in the VN rugby club members threatening Okazuki, not wanting him to get too close to their dorm mother. The anime adapts the first of these meetings in its first episode, and we've got occasional Misae moments ever since. But before the route proper, the anime again adds an extended illusionary world sequence, with the robot theorizing about the balls of light, content taken from around the midpoint of Nagisa route. We then get an anime-exclusive transition of our main pair returning to the dorms to bring Suno food from Nagisa's parents, where they find him planning to sell a familiar little furball. And maybe its greatest example of added foreshadowing, this furry friend's been hanging around the dorm since the start of the show, while the VN route instead has Misae describing the cat to Okazuki, explaining it's gone missing, before he simply finds Suno with the cat. And proving his VN incarnation is downright awful by comparison, VN Suno isn't just trying to sell the cat, he's planning to flay it and sell the pelt. Fortunately, both plans are thwarted by Okazuki immediately snitching to Misae, earning him plus anime Nagisa an invite to her room so she can thank him. She then explains she adopted the cat off the street years ago, but still hasn't given him a name, calling out the cat's odd fondness for Okazuki in the anime, while in the VN she drops the first hints to the cat's identity, offhandedly mentioning the cat first appeared when she was in high school. It's also here we get the first of many cut conversations between Okazuki and Misae, diving into her history and motivation, as Okazuki jokingly asks if she's continuing to work at such a dumpy job because she's waiting for some guy, only for a reaction to reveal he hit the nail on the head. There's then a knock at the door, setting up a string of visitors asking Misae for advice. In the VN this starts with a rugby club member before Sunohara then Tomoyo visit in subsequent days. The anime instead has Tomoyo drop in the conversation first, followed by the rugby player, Suno having been there from the start. Let's follow the VN's order for now. Due to the rugby team's prior intimidation, VN Okazuki elects to hide himself in Misae's futon, much to her dismay, where he overhears the rugby player consulting her about his constipation issues. Misae complaining to Okazuki that the dorm residents treat her like an actual mother after he leaves. And that's where this meeting ends in the VN. You're given a choice to ask Misae if you can return again, which determines if you lock into her route or not. Already the vibes are different from the anime version, with some flirtier back and forth and Misae reluctantly allowing Okazuki to continue his visits. And I hate to admit it, but just like with Mei's route, despite the problematic circumstances, the two have a great dynamic. Like that route, Smartly never goes too far, but provides a unique opportunity for Misae to finally display some much needed character depth and emotional complexity, acting as a fun foil to Okazuki by being even more self-assured and cynical than he is. Following the VN only Suno consultation, we get the route's next big choice. Rebuffing Okazuki's advances, Misae asks what he even likes about her in the first place, and you get a series of 3 choices. To continue the route, you have to select the right choice for each, Okazuki telling her that she scolds, she worries, and her futon smells nice, capping it off by telling her she's beautiful. The significance of these lines is only revealed later during the flashback, which makes it an odd guessing game finding the correct choice to continue the route. Or it would be if the correct choice wasn't always the first option. This means it's not really much of a roadblock, so long as you can resist the option to tell her she has a high power level, which as we all know is objectively the correct way to raise up a girl. We'll learn why later, but this trio of lines hits a weak point, and we see Misae first show vulnerability, leaning into Okazuki admitting that if that's what he likes about her, it might be compatible after all, but refuses to reveal more. VN Okazuki's visits continue off-screen despite Misae's grumbling, until like in the anime Tomoyo visits, while Okazuki again hides in the futon. Much of the conversation is adapted in the anime, except this is the pair's first meeting in the VN, with Tomoyo explaining her goal to get elected and revealing Misae was the school's first female student council president. Anime Tomoyo has of course already won her election, and instead mentions occasionally visiting Misae to ask for advice. But surprisingly, this isn't just a cameo in the VN, as Tomoyo's reveal makes Okazuki realize he doesn't know anything about Misae's past or her mysterious prior lover, inspiring him to embark on a VN-only scheme to get her to reveal her secrets, recruiting a string of female students to visit Misae and ask her about romance. This begins with a surprisingly sad development, as VN Okazuki's first victim is either Ryo or Nagisa, depending on your choices. He strong-arms them to ask Misae about their love problems, secretly listening as they reveal they have an unrequited crush on him. Misae even encourages Okazuki to go after them instead, but it's too late now, you're locked into Misae route, and she even sighs about how sad it is to see their first love go up in smoke like that. It's also one of the reveals that characterizes V and Nagisa as a little too desperate and wish fulfillment-y for me, since she here admits to falling in love with Okazuki literally at first sight, which makes some narrative sense, but makes their romance feel a little too good to be true from the player's perspective. Okazuki escalates with a string of unnamed recruits, until one girl cracks Misae and she drops some details of her failed high school romance. Misae's upset at Okazuki, but does finally discuss it with him. It's an enjoyably fresh dynamic for Clanhead, highlighted by the fact that Misae uniquely has a wistful expression as part of her standard palette. It also serves to increase the mystery and anticipation for learning about Misae's past, something the anime doesn't have time to set up, as Okazuki admits he's jealous of this mysterious boy despite Misae saying he was plain and didn't compare at all to her shining high school life. Okazuki leaves, but realizes he really does like Misae, and decides to finally shoot a shot. He returns a final time, now as the one asking for love advice, and we get a fantastic back and forth as he shoots out each of Misae's suggestions for who he might be crushing on, narrowing down the suspect's list each time. But Misae beats him to the punch, adding that if it's the dorm mother he's referring to, he should give up, since she fell in love a long time ago and is even still waiting for him. She drives the point home, saying she's no longer the shining person she was in high school and Okazuki should give up, but Okazuki stumbles into a VN-only weak point by declaring it wasn't the Misae from high school he fell in love with, but the Misae of right now. Like with his prior 3 lines, the flashback will reveal this comment's significance, but it breaks Misae and leaves her in tears. Okazuki stays with her, holding her cat, but as he drifts off to sleep, he begins to dream a strange dream. Okazuki's surprisingly effective seduction is, of course, not present in the anime. Instead, as mentioned, Tomoya first drops in to ask about student council stuff before the rugby club member also appears, not asking about constipation, but looking for advice for his upcoming date. In anime, Misae recommends the upcoming autumn festival, an anime creation that also plays into its version of the conclusion. And it's this that much less elegantly transitions into Misae discussing her past. Okazuki randomly mentions that she has lots of fans at school, mentioning he's heard the 3 important lines secondhand, that she scolds, worries, and smells nice. Misae noticeably falls into thought, but the fact Okazuki simply heard and repeated these lines not only makes it even more of a random coincidence, but totally kills the line's significance in the first place. In the VN they're impactful to Misae because only Shima, her prior lover, and later Okazuki saw her that way, while in the anime it's apparently the common opinion. The anime then adds Misae encouraging Okazuki to take Nagisa on a date to the aforementioned fall festival, explaining Suno mentioned they rarely go out. A true observation, but something that could have been alleviated if not for the anime's choice to adapt these random side routes instead. Misae then mentions watching our main couple reminds her of her past, and while Nagisa chats with her about her school days, Okazuki drifts off holding her cat, and like in the VN we transition into the flashback portion of the route. Both flashbacks begin with lines we don't yet have context for, mentioning a charm that holds a single wish and the speaker asking an unseen individual to promise to take it to her, before we see a familiar school entrance, now in the past. Like with Kotomi's childhood flashback, this perspective shift is significantly more impactful in the VN, given that it's otherwise entirely written from Okazuki's first-person POV. But we now take on the perspective of Shima, the VN text even referring to him as simply me until his name is introduced. In both versions we see a young Misae waiting for her crush, but as he exits he notices our perspective character and mistakes him for her boyfriend. Upset that he'd sabotaged her romance, Misae punishes this stranger with violence, which despite both versions' frequent use of slapstick feels a little over the line given she doesn't even know him yet. Unshaken, Shima introduces himself and explains he came to grant her a single wish. Misae doesn't remember him, but he explains she talked to him years ago when he was hospitalized and gave him strength, so he's returned to pay it back with a wish. Misae finally remembers, but seems genuinely put off in the VN that he's so intent on paying back such a small interaction, as in both versions he dismisses her desire to get rid of him by asking for a trivial wish, insisting she takes it seriously. Via Misae also foreshadows the route's twist, mentioning they seemed different back then in the hospital, more mature and accepting of his fate. But to Misae's dismay, Shima continues to wait for her before and after school. Misae's friends confront him, and, especially in the VN, these two are absolute gems. Female friend characters in anime can tend to fall into the trope of either being shallow or bitchy, but these two absolutely are not, and are allowed to be both likable and complex. They tease Misae, but in the VN get serious when it seems like she might be an actual stalker. In either case they tell him to give up, due to Misae's existing crush. Shima enthusiastically offers to use Misae's wish to make her crush fall for her, but Misae refuses, claiming it'd be wrong to mess with someone's emotions, an ironic comment given what she eventually wishes for. Her altruistic approach isn't rewarded though, as her crush again walks in on them and mistakes the two as a couple, leading to Misae frantically attempting to dispel a misunderstanding. As Shima and Misae walk home, she mentions how odd it is that her apparent stalker enthusiastically supports her and her crush getting together, instead of being jealous. The anime shortcuts her developing feelings, as she mentions that she likes the innocent part of Shima, while in the VN we begin to see the parallels to Okazuki's behavior as Misae half-heartedly complains about Shima's good-natured persistence. We get a series of on- and off-screen meetings in the VN, but the anime of course jumps forward to the next plot point. While Shima's again waiting for Misae, her crush confronts him, explaining he knows about Misae's feelings, but already has a GF and doesn't know how to turn her down, so asks Shima to tell Misae for him. The anime softens his request and makes him appear genuinely concerned, while in the VN it's a transparently cowardly, self-centered move. In either case, Misae notices Shima's upset after school, a conversation moved to a cool park bridge in the anime. Just like her and Okazuki's hypothetical back and forth in the VN, Misae and Shima discuss Shima's hypothetical discovery that the girl he likes' crush already has a girlfriend. But this younger Misae doesn't pick up on the implication, and unwittingly encourages him, telling him this means he has a chance and can take advantage of the girl he likes' sadness. And while this conversation shows Shima has caught feelings for Misae by this point, his nature remains unchanged, and he asks her how he could be happy seeing the person he loves in pain. Misae apologizes when her crush walks by with his GF and she realizes who Shima was talking about. She's played herself. Her crush again comes off as way more of a dick in the VN, as instead of coincidentally walking by, he hides and calls out to her after he saw Shima talking to her, joking about a double date. Either way, Misae runs off, and is absent the following day. Her friends, Yuki and Saki, tell Shima she's at a park and encourage him to cheer her up. In the VN, they additionally reveal Misae now looks forward to their after-school meetings and propose dumb lines he can use to seduce her. They both ship it. The anime cuts as follow, but we do see Shima break out the lame lines in both versions when he catches up to Misae. This may also be the only example of the anime using a less interesting setting, as instead of talking on Naruto swings, they just sit together on a bench. It's here they have a heart-to-heart, and we get an endearing relationship moment in the VN, oddly ruined in the anime. Anime Misae jokes it's not like Shima loves her or anything, only to be surprised when he contradicts her, which, given the prior day's hypothetical discussion, shouldn't be a surprise. Compared to the VN, she doesn't seem particularly excited either, just asking what about her likes. She drops the same question in the VN, but the conversation is more playful, with her encouraging Shima, and in both versions he gives the same lines Okazuki does, that she scolds, worries, smells nice, and is beautiful. VN Okazuki's additional critical hit is also contextualized here, as Shima clarifies he didn't fall in love with the Misae he met in the hospital who gave him hope, but the Misae he met now. VN Misae admits she likes him too, and they kiss. But while VN Misae is clearly smitten, her anime incarnation is oddly cold, not being nearly as forward in simply thanking him for his confession. I'm not sure if that was the anime's intent, or they just wanted to make Misae act more shy for some odd reason, but it's a confusing change given this is one of the arc's few chances to convince us it was a relationship so important to Misae that she's still caught up in it years later. It wouldn't even have taken any additional runtime to have Misae act more obviously interested here, especially since they do end up dating after this in both versions. The anime does at least circle back to show Misae's concern for Shima in an added follow-up where she ditches her friends to meet up with Shima instead. And while this is more visual than Yuki and Saki just telling Shima about her concern, it's an odd inconsistency for them to even ask, given the pair's friendship with Shima and clear shipping of their relationship. The anime next cuts to Misae explaining she's the student council president as they walk home, explaining she may be busy but asking him to go with her to the upcoming anime original Autumn Festival. And, as you might have guessed, this was originally the Founders Festival in the VN. It's honestly pretty cool how it serves as a temporal landmark, reappearing in multiple routes in totally different scenarios. The VN plot of course develops more slowly, explaining the couple continue to go to school together until Misae is eventually elected, with Shima in both cases expressing the desire to see that hardworking side of Misae. Misae's friends in both versions decide to grant that wish, dressing him up in a girl's uniform and smuggling him into the school, a journey that includes both a Yoshino and Ibuki cameo, revealing they were all at school at the same time and explaining Misae's interaction with the two during the baseball route. In both versions, Ibuki forces disguised Shima to talk to Misae in the student council room, and he runs off after instinctually expressing his love for her. It's a fun distraction, but as Shima changes back into his normal attire in both versions, he notices his charm, shocking him out of his routine and reminding him of the promise he's been neglecting. We're about to get to the gut punch of the route, with a fantastically paced escalation of events in the VN. This involves Shima confronting his now girlfriend about her wish, him visiting home and realizing the truth, Misae telling him her wish, then Shima's disappearance. But just like its adaptation of Fuko route, the anime fundamentally butchers the pacing of the events, lessening the build-up by having Shima first visit home and learn the truth, before concluding a mushy combination of the three other events. In the VN, we instead ramp up with Shima frantically asking Misae about her wish, irritated he'd gotten so swept up in his newfound happiness that he forgot his original goal. Showing how much her disposition towards him has changed, Misae dismisses it not out of disinterest, because she has no need for it now due to their present happiness, but still agrees to genuinely think about it when Shima reiterates that this is also important to him, because he promised someone. But Shima doesn't remember who, and the two discuss his hazy memories, Misae unworried but Shima growing increasingly uneasy. It's a great development to build suspense because we have access to Shima's first-person thoughts and can see his increasing confusion in his own lack of answers, especially when it's revealed the light from his charm has disappeared. The unease grows as like in the anime, the VN now jumps to Misae's friends kidnapping him to visit his house while Misae's busy prepping for the festival, joking that they'll brag to her that they visited before his GF. Shima goes along with it, but shocks himself when he suddenly realizes he doesn't remember where home is. It comes back to him, but V and Shima pales as they approach, until the door opens and his mom appears. She asks if they're Shima's friends, and when the girls enthusiastically agree, she asks if they're here to offer incense. Not Shima runs off, remembering the truth. He's not Shima, he's not even human. He's a cat real Shima entrusted his last wish to. The VN further explain that the light's disappearance is tied with him lingering on in this form, using up its power and risking its ability to grant a wish. Saki and Yuki catch up and confront him, but if you're expecting cliché drama, move on, because these girls are absolutely real ones. They comfort him and promise not to press or tell Misae, reassuring him that whatever's going on, they'll always be friends forever. It's a fantastically empathetic response the anime somehow manages to improve on, as they show concern for their other friend as well, generally suggesting he should tell Misae about whatever's going on only once he feels comfortable. Given their limited screen time, and the VN's frequent sexist tendencies, it wouldn't have been a surprise if these two were written as total cliches, but I adore how, especially in the VN, they're not. They formed a genuine bond and friendship with Shima as well. He's not just the guy their friend is dating. Word for word, this flashback might contain the VN's best writing, given how much it's invested me in the pair and their friendship with Shima, despite the three characters sharing a single-digit number of scenes. With all this build-up, the VN is able to deliver on a banger payoff. Not Shima visits Misae as she's prepping for the Founders Festival, her excitement of the relationship causing her to miss his downer mood. She invites him to the festival like in the anime, additionally promising to sneak away from her prez duties if it comes down to it, a fantastic parallel to Tomoya's similar actions in her route. She teases him, the VN rubbing in just how happy she's become in their relationship, before finally giving him her serious wish, for Shima to love her forever. It's a tragically romantic twist now that we know the truth, and Shima breaks down crying in realization that despite his inevitable fate, he truly loves Misae, but he loves Yuki and Saki, in this transient existence he's about to lose. Lacking the same setup, the anime instead starts towards this moment by cutting directly from the house visit to Misae and Shima actually at the Autumn Festival, getting a date montage complete with a Grandpa Dongo cameo. It's an odd decision that undercuts any unease or tension built up by the home visit, although we at least get Misae calling Shima out for his cross-dressing visit, something she oddly never acknowledges in the VN. We then get a combination of the VN's two prior conversations, as Shima shows Misae the charm and notices the light's gone, Misae dismissing it due to their present happiness, and Shima insisting, leading to anime Misae pulling the "love me forever" promise out of the blue. It's a change that shoves the build-up right next to the payoff, and makes Misae's wish feel like more of a spur-of-the-moment thought and not the accumulation of Shima's persistent questioning throughout the entire route. Anime Shima similarly breaks down, but unlike VN Misae who's so into him she doesn't mind, anime Misae seems genuinely turned off by this reaction, making an excuse to run off and grab drinks. He's gone when she returns as she frantically searches through the crowds before he gives a goodbye and disappears before her eyes. It's a cliché finale that lacks the pacing or tragic irony of the VN, where Misae of course never gets her date. We instead cut directly from her wish to a seemingly third-person perspective after school, where she commiserates with Saki and Yuki about having been dumped again. Shima never appeared. It's an unexpectedly sudden transition that communicates Misae's confusion and loss more effectively than we saw the gory details, as her friends reassure her that Shima must have had a reason and will return, but again proving they were true friends with Shima, don't mention the house visit. It's then revealed we haven't switched to a third-person perspective after all, as Misae addresses the viewer, a cat that suddenly started appearing at his school gate. We're still in Shima's perspective after all. Both versions then show Misae returning to the dorms, calling friends and discussing how the cat from high school appeared again. Oddly, the anime adds her randomly guessing the plot twist, as she muses that such a fairy tale scenario couldn't possibly be true. In both versions, Okazuki then awakes, recognizing the cat must have shown him this vision. And you might be surprised to learn that this is the end of the VN route, as Okazuki returns to his room and we end on Cat Shima's current thoughts, wondering if he truly fulfilled his promise but admitting he enjoys his present existence. To get a proper conclusion, you'll have to start a follow-up playthrough of our other student council president's route, where Okazuki again runs into Misae during the present-day Founders Festival. There's of course no such shenanigans in the anime, and the conclusion is instead adapted during the Autumn Festival the following day. Okazuki and Nagisa are visiting together, and we get KyoAni's contractually guaranteed slew of cameos, including a further setup for Yukine route as we see her visiting with a gaggle of gangsters. Nagisa calls Okazuki out for being deep in thought before Misae appears chasing her cat. This similarly occurs in the VN as Okazuki wanders the halls with a disguised Tomoyo, whose superhuman athleticism is used to help trace the cat down to an empty classroom. Either way, the cat is cornered by Misae, who gives it a disturbingly seductive expression in the VN, but as she complains, Okazuki hears Shima's thoughts and speaks, saying that he's happy Misae finally fulfilled his promise. Misae is surprised but understands the implication, then making it somehow worse by having her only strike the seductive pose now that she's realized. VN Okazuki returns to Tomoyo route, while in the anime Nagisa understandably asks WTF is going on and Okazuki promises to explain later, off-screen. In both versions he's oddly nonplussed, but it's an even stranger non-reaction in the anime's connected timeline. You think Okazuki would show a little surprise at being able to psychically communicate with a cat? The anime's shortest arc then concludes with the reunited couple accompanied by a ball of light, its appearance hinting at the nature of the lights before it's finally revealed in the next arc. It's similar to how a ball of light appears on the VN's title screen in the completion of most good endings, mechanically hinting at why they appear. Our episode then ends on the same monologue from the end of VN Misae route, including showing real Shima for the first time, confirming Cat Shima doesn't look like him and explaining why Shima's mom didn't recognize him. In the VN I kinda just assumed it was a selective invisibility situation like with Fuko. And that's it for Clannad's oddest scenario. Despite the strange subject, it's a legitimately interesting narrative in the VN, and it's maybe my favorite integration of magical elements into Clannad. The concept of carrying a physical wish to deliver to someone is such an intriguing scenario. Unfortunately, the route's content ends up so rushed in the anime, little of the original emotion or tragedy remains. But maybe the adaptation's worsen is that its focal character doesn't even get any development. Misae's oddly static throughout the anime's flashback, compared to the VN where she starts off where we'd expect, but slowly changes as she warms up to Shima, the relationship bringing out a positive and enthusiastic side of her we haven't seen before, and don't ever see in the anime. Even her uncomfortably flirty dynamic with Okazuki allows the VN to give her character nuance not allowed in the anime, providing fun banter as she legitimately opens up to him, contrasted by her steadfast refusal to not discuss the past. This gives her character a depth and complexity that a reader couldn't have predicted from before starting down her route. While the anime's obvious removal of the cougar hunting content and Spark's notification of the flashback means we don't really learn anything about Misae's character we haven't seen already. It's just backstory without purpose. It also doesn't help that the removal of the route's first half means we lose out on the suspense and mystery the VN is able to build up. And while Okazuki's romantic advances are a little out of character, the parallels between his and Shima's interactions is a fantastic dynamic to discover on subsequent playthroughs. By contrast, Nagisa's inclusion in the anime is so wooden it somehow manages to hurt my investment in the relationship, with the couple's date at the festival somehow less romantic than when they were throwing flirty glances back in Kotomi route, which also managed to give Nagisa something to do instead of making her an NPC following Okazuki around with no involvement or even understanding of the plot. The route's other main setup, in both versions, is the reveal the light bulbs can grant a wish, a mechanic that will return the climax of the entire series. But in this case, we don't get as clear a happy ending. Both versions attempt to present it as such, but if you think about it, this has to be one of the VN's most tragic endings, right? Sure, Misae realizes Shima didn't abandon her, but there's an eldritch horror realizing the love of your life is entrapped in the body of a mute animal. There's no way they can regain anything like the relationship they had before, even if Misae's unexpectedly seductive expression implies she's down with some non-PETA approved activities. There must be a creeping horror realizing she wasted so many years of Shima's remaining lifespan not recognizing him, because unless his transmutation conveyed continued benefits, he doesn't have many years left, considering real Shima owned the cat while Misae was still in middle school. And God, I hope she never considered she was in the possession of an honest-to-God wish that could have fixed Shima's situation if only she knew. If anything, I hope the light's power was fully exhausted by the time she made her wish, otherwise she absolutely wasted it. If I were her, I wake up in cold sweats wondering if wishing for Shima to stay with me forever instead of love me forever might have tripped a wish technicality and allowed him to remain human. If only she kept to her earlier conviction to not use the wish to influence others' feelings. And while the anime obviously doesn't address these implications, it does seem to recognize the lack of future Misae is left with at the end of her route. And just like I pointed out for Nagisa and Tomoe route before, it seems to strategically address this implication, adding Shima wishing Misae future happiness, which leads her to tell Nagisa that maybe she'll try and join her youth once more. It's another tiny moment, but continues the anime's trend of pushing back against the VN's more depressing implications, by presenting some sort of hopeful future for Misae outside of her first failed love. But that would be the most thought anyone's ever given to these 2 episodes. And while I highly recommend anyone not familiar with the VN to pick it up and give Misae route a go, we're probably all better off forgetting the last 2 anime episodes. Arguably the biggest question we're left with is why they bothered adapting it in the first place. A certain blonde-haired boy's route was entirely removed from the anime, so why bother adapting a side route when it's clear there's not enough time to create quality episodes? Maybe Misae is just a popular enough character they felt forced into it? Instead of attempting to figure that one out, let's jump into a route the anime has been repeatedly hinting at, and which also dives into the nature of the mysterious lightballs, with 2 episodes focused on Big Sis Yukine. Yukine's arc is nowhere near as weird as Misae's. In many ways it's downright pedestrian, but KyoAni's adaptation certainly causes it to stand out as unique. As I previously alluded to, Yukine's VN route doesn't consist of much more than Okazuki and Suno hanging out in the ref room day after day, arguing over who Yukine likes more, before it suddenly ends. I've heard rumors Ki admitted her route was unfinished, and while I've seen no proof for that, I'd absolutely believe it. In fact, we've already seen some of the route's most memorable moments, the magic spells, during the first season, and unlike the start of the VN, anime Okazuki now has better things to do than kill time in the ref room all day. Meaning, unlike Misae route, there's not much VN content left for the anime to cover, even with another strict 2-episode limit. This results in the anime inventing its own plot and conflict for these next 2 episodes whole cloth, more liberally adding to the source material than anywhere else. The change in writing is certainly noticeable, but at least allows the anime to pace story beats properly, avoiding another hyper-rushed adaptation. In both versions, Okazuki can run to Yukine early in common route. In the VN, this involves choosing to ditch class to bum a nap, resulting in Okazuki entering the ref room and encountering Yukine upon waking up. Our more active anime pair instead runs into her while randomly discussing the drama club in the ref room, which Yukine similarly enters. She immediately asks if they need anything in both versions, and shockingly fulfills Okazuki's request when he jokes about wanting a coffee. To continue her route in the VN, you need to choose to nap through the following class period as well, whereupon Yukine returns again and like in the anime discusses the ref room being a place for unused books. She's also noticeably ditzier and more energetic in the VN, which includes a gag of her forgetting Okazuki's name in addition to immediately going along with Okazuki's jokes. I wrote a whole essay about this in my last video, but it's just like with Nagisa. The anime removes these quirks to make her more believably human, but also results in a less unique character who doesn't get much depth beyond nice, helpful girl. The VN continues with Suno discovering these meetings, getting jealous and tagging along as well, leading to multiple days of solo and group visits. The anime similarly kept Yukine in its plot, having our group occasionally drop in to discuss ongoing issues with her. It's a great move to keep viewers from forgetting about her and set up the vibe of the ref room while still tackling content from other routes. It's also around this time in the VN that the magic spells appear, which in a correction to my last video does include Fuko doing the thriller if you've interacted with her enough. The anime has also provided a surprising amount of foreshadowing this season to set up Yukine's delinquent connections, with suspicious individuals appearing both when Sunohara attempted to ask her out during May route, as well as a cutaway to her during the previous festival. More significantly, she revealed during May route that she has a brother who she didn't initially get along with, a notable change given this isn't revealed until midway through the VN and is a significant plot point. Our anime arc proper begins with another illusionary world cutaway, again jumping back to content covered during the play prep in the VN. It begins by uniquely showing the robot watching 2 balls of light appear, mirroring the happiness Misae and Shima have now found, before you see the coming winter draining the girl's energy, and the 2 decide they need to escape to the distant warm place from the robot's memories. Returning to the real world, we get an anime-only callback to May route as Suno attempts to ask Yukine out for real, only for her to turn him down with the same line Nagisa used. They're interrupted as an injured man enters through the window, dramatically speaking to Yukine as our main characters watch wordlessly on. In the VN, this isn't actually out of the blue. Yukine mentions one of her friends is visiting, but they're no less surprised, Suno having assumed Yukine's friend was a cute girl like her. Either way, Yukine helps the injured man. In the anime she's worried, while in the VN she's hilariously nonplussed, assumingly used to her friend's overdramatic antics. She reassures him, then walks him through a magic spell to restore his friendship with his bros. Humorously set up in the VN as we previously saw the spell as for getting your deskmate to fall in love with you. Close enough, I guess. In the VN they leave, while in the anime he joins them for the chowdown, explaining that Yukine is like a big sis to the delinquents in town before a rival appears, and the 2 exit to fight, neither wanting to inconvenience Yukine. This explanation is instead delivered by Sunohara in the VN, once again displaying excellent detective skills by explaining he learned Yukine has a reputation for being friends with all sorts of bad folks, adding that she moved to the ref room to limit the disruption caused by their visits. The anime group walks home together while Yukine explains this version's unique conflict. The gang war is brewing in this town between her brother's gang and the rivals from the other side of the river. As promised, it is created whole cloth by KyoAni. There's no rivalry or anything like it in the VN. Anime Yukine also throws out some nonsensical facts to justify later plot points, explaining that her brother has somehow gone all Jason Bourne and no one knows what he looks like or where he is, so the rival gang can't attack him. The anime is about to skip past a ton of relatively inconsequential VN content, but it does uniquely explore Yukine's motivation for hanging out with such a rough crowd, full-heartedly defending them as kind but misunderstood. While the anime gang seems to accept Yukine's compatriots without issue, maybe a reflection of the crazier antics they've already gone through, the VN takes this revelation a little more seriously, with Okazuki interrogating Yukine on why when they next meet. It's an interesting confrontation, especially as he too meets her definition of someone good-hearted but labeled as a delinquent by society. We then get a ton of follow-up visits with him and Sunohara, some with other friends joining in, some without, before in both versions Yukine is ineptly taken hostage by a young boy. This occurs during that same walk home in the anime. The boy's so young he's clearly no threat, but Yukine reacts to the situation very differently in each version. In the anime she's straightforwardly kind, diffusing his attack via piggyback and sitting him down to ask what's up, while her ditzier VN counterpart refuses to do anything since the boy told her not to move, before she accidentally knocks him over when turning to make coffee. Either way, the boy explains his sister was taken by some shady folks, and he thought Yukine could help. In the VN, this is due to the rumors around Yukine being blown out of proportion, but in the anime it's because she's the gang leader's sister, with the anime adding some more transparent plot setup as the boy, not you the viewer, never mind, mistakes Suno for the boss due to his blonde hair, something no one ever corrects for some reason. But the situation rapidly de-escalates in both versions when Yu reveals his sis was 21 and basically just moved out, leading Suno to pick on him for being a siscon before giving a genuinely stirring speech about how he needs to live his own life. Continuing its impeccable eye for continuity, the anime changes V and Suno's line about how sibling relationships eventually fall apart, to him saying sibling bonds are strong enough to remain even when the two eventually part, since of course in this continuity he's just repaired his relationship with his sister. In other cases leads to Yu following Suno around the following day, in the anime out of admiration while in the V and Yu seems to be driven more by curiosity. Suno proves a poor example in both, getting caught by a teacher due to his massive dumpy and immediately selling Okazuki out, made worse in the VN due to him having just told Yu that a man has to fight his own battles. The VN also humorously expands on this by having one of the real delinquents stop him while Suno's gone and teaching Yu how to extort people, before Yukine sets him straight. The group next leaves school, returning home in the VN while in the anime they're headed towards a hideout Yukine learns Yu's sis is at. We get a very different conclusion to this arc in the VN. As V and Okazuki and Yukine admire the sibling-like bond Suno's formed with the kid, his mom appears, clearly stink-eyeing them and telling them to stay away from her son, immediately stereotyping Suno as a bad influence due to his dyed blonde hair. She's technically correct, but I've always found it an odd accusation in anime. There's people running around with naturally blue and purple hair, but blonde somehow always means it's dyed? This development means the VN never actually pays off on the missing cis plot, outside of Suno's lecturing, but it ties fantastically into the themes the VN's already introduced, as the trio experiences firsthand what Yukine described, being treated as criminals just for their appearance. Without the gang war, this theme of genuine people being stereotyped and outcast by society is one of the main through lines of Yukine's arc, and shares some great cross-route theming with Nagisa route, which similarly deals with the trio being treated as failures for not living up to normal student expectations. But the anime they instead head uninterrupted to the bar hideout, plot shenanigans set up as we see a rival gang overhear Yu refer to Suno as the secretive big boss. We get a genuinely fun sequence in the bar as Yu reunites with his sis, before a conversation where the anime interestingly chooses to instead focus on the cross-route theme of family. As the group chats, Yukine explains her brother wasn't on good terms with her parents, a line which clearly resonates with Okazuki, in which the anime smartly ties into Tomoyo route, with Okazuki quoting her story about running wild because she wasn't able to appreciate the family she had. It's a different focus from the VN, but it's not bad, and clearly in line with the anime's greater interest in characters over themes. And while the VN deserves massive credit for thematically linking its disparate routes, it's also fantastic how the anime throws in these small direct connections, reinforcing that this is a single continuing narrative and that characters are still impacted by the events of prior arcs. Yukine then continues the plot setup, again making a ridiculous assertion claiming that all pictures of her bro are destroyed, but the people say he looked like her, as well as explaining he's not here right now due to being hospitalized after a car crash. Just to highlight how much the plots have diverged, I'd again like to point out that despite having hung out with her for much longer, V and Okazuki still doesn't know Yukine has a brother at this point, much less anything about his condition. We also get a fantastic anime gag that helps make up for the zero chemistry our main couple have displayed over the last 3 routes, as Matt and Nagisa again returns when Okazuki begins to enjoy the attention he's getting a little too much, only to reveal she was joking when Okazuki switches to profusely apologizing. It's a tiny moment, but again reinforces how the couple's personalities are affecting each other. Nagisa's become a bit of a prankster now too. But now all that transparent plot setup begins to pay off, as the group's ambushed by a rival gang as they leave, targeting Big Boss, before who should make a triumphant return to the narrative but Tomoyo, who conveniently defeats the delinquent so fast they aren't able to realize it's her, and attribute it to Suno. Finally, the anime returns to the VN's more laid-back moments, as in both versions we return to the ref room to meet a tired Yukine. V and Okazuki pulls a switcheroo and asks if there's a spell she could use to cheer herself up, a suggestion Nagisa makes in the anime. And conveniently there is. It's the infamous lap pillow. Proving she's just as secure in the relationship as Okazuki has shown to be, Nagisa selflessly volunteers Okazuki's lap, though admits she is a little jealous. Yukine quickly falls asleep in both versions, following a cute VN exchange where Yukine asks for a bedtime story and Okazuki makes shit up. But there's a plot twist in the VN. Okazuki checks the book while she sleeps, and unlike in the anime, there's no lap pillow spell. In the anime, we instead get a gag with Suno entering and breaking down in jealousy, mirroring an earlier VN scene where he walked in on Okazuki feeding Yukine, before in both versions Yukine whispers her brother's name in her sleep. This isn't a surprise in the anime, she even mentions her brother used to give her lap pillows. But this is the first reference to Kazuto Miyazawa in the VN, and as they leave school, Okazuki finds himself in the slumps, assuming this means that Yukine sees him like a brother and doesn't, like him. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is finally the VN route's conflict. Okazuki wondering if Yukine has the hots for him or just sees him as a platonic brother figure, with Suno and Okazuki repeatedly debating who'll get the girl. As far as narratives go, it does technically count as a conflict that drives the plot, but With 2 radically different conflicts for Okazuki to tackle, the story is effectively fully diverged, with entirely separate content in each version until they rejoin during the arc's conclusion. The next day, an injured delinquent enters through the window, kicking off a brewing gang war in the anime, but in the VN this is business as usual for Yukine. Okazuki helps take the man to the infirmary, and again asks Yukine if she doesn't regret the inconvenience these friendships cause her, having to support so many people. Yukine rejects the concept though, and clarifies she's happy doing this and hopes she can continue to do so forever. This leads to the most significant relationship moment of the route, as Okazuki works up the courage to offer his support to Yukine, saying that because so many people rely on her, he'll always be there when she needs someone to support her. Yukine is clearly affected by this, becoming legitimately flustered as she admits no one's told her that before. It may not be dramatic, but it's a cute development to see Yukine, who has devoted her life to selflessly supporting others, finally having someone offer her that same support. Mundane nonsense continues, followed by some nonsense drama as Sunohara appears to break under Okazuki's constant, legitimately cruel bullying and attacks him. It seems like we might get some legitimate drama out of this, but no, it's just an excuse to get the pair suspended for the next 3 days and their relationship instantly returns to normal. What this does accomplish is an amusing reversal, with Okazuki now the one to sneak in the ref room window and meet up with Yukine, including a charming gag where she nonchalantly offers him food, only to later reveal she did know he was suspended and or being pursued by teachers trying to hunt him down. These visits include a concerning dose of lap pillow and flirty back and forth, as Yukine seems to have legitimately fallen for Okazuki due to his offer of support, but which he continues to interpret as sibling-like affection. However, it's revealed they were observed, one of the visiting delinquents having seen the entire thing, as well as Sunohara, but having respectfully waited to enter until Yukine left for class so he didn't interrupt the mood. We get a tense moment as he sizes Okazuki up, assuming him to be another hoodlum due to him not being in uniform, before revealing he saw the entire thing and they chat about Yukine and her brother. The man drops some decently unsubtle hints, but Okazuki doesn't pick up on it and badmouths Yukine's brother, leading to an immediate punch and the reveal her brother is dead. Okazuki takes it in, then apologizes, deflating the man's anger as he admits maybe Okazuki isn't too different from Yukine's bro after all. They both have a rough mouth but know exactly when to apologize. Okazuki returns again the next day and is clearly hot and bothered by Yukine's increasing forwardness but even more depressed, now thinking she's just using him to fill a dead brother-shaped hole. But before he leaves, Yukine, for the first time, asks him to come the next day, a request that again peeping delinquent echoes. Okazuki complies, attempting a hitman-style infiltration this time by wearing his uniform and sneaking in with the other students. He and Yukine banter some before she asks for a final VN-only spell, although like before, it seems like this one might not be by the book, asking Okazuki to hold her close and chant, to grant her the strength to stay strong throughout the day. Okazuki complies, sooner or later revealing the peeping Tom was crushing rocks with his bare hands as he watched, before an expression we haven't seen before washes over Yukine's face, one of pain, as she reveals it's the anniversary of her brother's death and she's taking the day off to visit him, asking Okazuki to go with her. Okazuki admits he already knew, and they depart along with Suno and the peeping Tom, their somber walk slowly accumulating more and more people until they reach the grave. It's a moment the anime also ends on, but the journey to get there is radically different. In the anime, the injured delinquent reveals the gang war has gone hot, with Tomoyo's devastating attack having convinced the rival gang that Yukine's bro, who they still think is Suno, is healed and ready to fight, and have launched a preliminary attack. As their group schemes in Suno's dorm, where else would they go, Tomoyo enters, and the anime again shows off its fantastic connective abilities by tying her character arc into this route, as she implores Yukine that they need to stop the fighting or it'll escalate, the police will get involved, and they'll all go down. It's a great cameo. Tomoyo's already gone through this character arc, realizing she can't just run wild, so it makes fantastic sense to tie her into Yukine's struggles. The VN actually is a similar meeting, although it's mostly just a cameo, with Suno inviting Tomoyo to the ref room to be a bunch of gathered gangsters early on in the VN if you talk to her enough, Suno attempting to get street cred by presenting her as a friend. She denies this, but admits to recognizing the gathered hooligans, and as in the anime, Yukine admits she'd heard of her. In the anime, however, this pushes Yukine to run out towards the other gang's hideout, hoping to convince him to end the fighting. Okazuki chases after, asking why she can't ask her brother to clear up this misunderstanding and we get this out of the blue fantastic mirror shot, which I think might be implying she does reveal the truth to Okazuki off screen here. In either case, the two approach the gang with Tomoyo's warning, although Yukine stops Okazuki from clearing up the misunderstanding and revealing it was Tomoyo who beat up the gang members, maybe for fear it would drag her back into that cycle of vengeance he's already worked so hard to escape. The rival leader agrees, but his gang still wants retribution, so he proposes a one-on-one fight between leaders, something they inexplicably agree to despite Kazuto being MIA. But the convenient confusion continues with Yukine's gang beseeching Suno to fight on their behalf, given they're somehow also under the impression he was the one to dispatch the rival attackers, leading to a riverside duel that even Nagisa calls out for being ridiculous. It's a far more dramatic conflict than the VN, and the presentation is absolutely top-notch, but it's here the anime's unique plot suffers the worst from tone-jarring plot conveniences. This begins as Nagisa reveals Sanae baked hyper-rainbow bread to support their team, adorably calling back to Meirao as Nagisa mentions Sanae wanted to support Sunohara, which predictably wipes out everyone who ate it, and leaves Okazuki as the only one conscious to challenge the rival gang. He does, and we get the season's second fantastically visceral fight out of it. Seriously, KyoAni needs to do a martial arts anime or something, but the sudden serious tone only causes the prior comedic plot point to feel even more ridiculous and out of place. It doesn't quite match the VN's more impactful themes of social acceptance, but seeing Okazuki's willingness to throw hands does also highlight Okazuki's similarity to Yukine's delinquent crowd. But the visual feast isn't over yet, as we get this immensely effective transition, cutting from Nagisa wailing in response to Okazuki's punishment to the sunset and Nagisa silently staring at the ground. The fight having lasted so long, her having seen Okazuki take so much punishment that she's too emotionally drained to even react. It's a brilliant way to instantly convey the absolute beating Okazuki's been taking. But while he's outmatched, Okazuki refuses to go down, gaining the rival leader's respect and coming to an understanding of sorts, only for the comedic writing to again interfere with her serious drama as Suno and Ko conveniently wake up from their pawn-produced slumber. Seeing Okazuki injured, they charge to attack, the rival gang responding in suit, both ignoring the original fighters' desperate pleas to stop. But as Okazuki predicted, the only thing that can stop them is Kazuto's arrival, and all freeze at his sudden appearance. Proving he was holding back, the rival gang leader immediately attacks, and in another fantastic cut realizes the truth too late to stop, decking the figure, a disguised Yukine, clean in the face. He's understandably confused, but Okazuki jumps in and berates him, yelling that of course she'd do the one thing she knew would stop the fighting. The tone of Okazuki's lecture is oddly similar to Akio's speech in Nagisa Rout's conclusion. Maybe he's growing up. But the reveal of Kazuto's fate is saved for yet another smart cut, as we immediately jump to everyone gathered at his grave the following day. Plots now reunited, Yukine begins to pray at the grave and speak about her brother in both versions. Despite the different setups, the vibe is surprisingly similar, the shock at learning of Kazuto's death having disarmed the rival gang, although V makes a relatable point to highlight how Suno and Okazuki feel uncomfortable as outsiders, given they're the only ones who hadn't met Kazuto and are only there at Yukine's request. In both versions, Yukine explains how she loved her bro, but he had a bad relationship with their parents and ran away from home. She was afraid of her brother's rough friends, but saw how proud of them he was, and at the funeral was moved by how they cried for him, so decided she should try to understand their way of life. She explained she was scared and constantly rejected, but made her way into their lives and found happiness among them, the VN further detailing her exploits of making them food and knitting mittens in the winter to slowly gain their acceptance. In the anime, her speech uniquely pivots to cap off its unique conflict, saying her brother only wished for peace, but their gang felt they had to keep his death a secret to avoid encouraging attack from their rivals. It's a small change, but creates surprisingly contradictory messages, given V and Yukine was inspired by how well loved her brother was, while in the anime his death was a point of conflict. It's also worth noting that Key's art style cannot do delinquents, as we finally see the rough outcasts who've been appearing all route, and they look like elementary schoolers. Even anime Suno looks tougher. In the anime, the rival gang prays at Kazuto's grave, finally fulfilling Yukine and her brother's wish for peace, while in the V, Yukine invites Okazuki to offer incense, and he does. This sudden happiness heralds the arrival of another ball of light in both versions. Although confusingly this only occurs on your first VN playthrough, causing me to temporarily gaslight myself into thinking I'd imagined the sequence when replaying through the VN for this comparison. I suppose it was done because mechanically each ball of light collected appears on the home screen, so maybe they wanted to make it clear you couldn't just replay the route to get additional ones? Still, it seems a little mechanically strict to remove this content for anyone casually replaying the route, because while the anime light floats away and the VN Okazuki absorbs it into his hand with a warm sensation, I guess explaining how he collects it on the home screen. But that's not all in the VN, as reaching the end of the route has conveniently resolved Okazuki's internal conflict as well, and in an admittedly cute, if socially inappropriate sequence, he asks Yukine if she wants him to perform a spell to raise everyone's spirits, promising he'll whip everyone into an uproar. Yukine agrees and Okazuki suddenly kisses her, musing that war is about to break out and that loving her will be a suicide mission. Credits roll, but surprisingly we're not finished. As far as I remember, this is the only VN route with a post-credits epilogue, as the characters again gather in the ref room, changed to the more visually dramatic rooftop in the anime. We first get the VN exclusive return of Yu, who's again visiting but has become more self-assured. Before, like in Nagisa route, Okazuki muses on how having a waifu means he doesn't hate school anymore. The anime instead adapts only the light ball related content, which also only appears on your first VN playthrough, although anime Yukine first makes an odd comment thanking Okazuki for helping her get over her brother, which doesn't really seem to relate to this version of the plot. Regardless, they continue by discussing the ball of light, which only Okazuki saw, and we finally get some explanation about their lore. It's an interesting place to hide this information. In the anime it makes sense given we're about to move into AfterStory proper. The only route with the light balls are really plot relevant, while the VN lets you stumble into this explanation at any time depending on the order you play through the routes. In both versions she explains or mentions the town's folklore, appearing when people were happy or when something good happened. The VN trusts the player to connect the dots with Misae route on their own, but despite her occurring just previously, the anime has much less faith in the viewer, adding Yukine mentioning that collecting one will grant a single wish, and if that wasn't enough, Nagisa also calls out the connection to Misae. Our main pair also continues to remain unbelievably nonplussed to discover magic is real, a downside of their characters not being allowed to change between the end of Nagisa route and the start of AfterStory, I suppose. We also get one cute couple moment between Yukine and Okazuki in the VN, despite it not officially confirming their relationship status, as she matter-of-factly states that most people no longer believe in those stories, but she does, because Tomoya said he saw one, a level of trust that melts her grumpy boy's heart. They then briefly theorize on why no one else saw the light ball, postulating Okazuki might somehow be special. And honestly, I don't think there is a non-circular reason for why only he can see them, besides being the MC, although V and Yukine suggest it might be because he's a rare modern heart that truly cares about the town. Okazuki quickly identifies he's the least appropriate fit for that definition, especially compared to Yukine, but it's here, only in your first playthrough Okazuki saw the light, that his final statement changes in a small but crazy way, as he mentions it's not just the school, but the entire town he's come to not hate. It's an interesting development given this is arguably also the conclusion Okazuki comes to in the final moments of AfterStory, with this being the lone other route where he's also able to make that change. And much faster too, since it didn't require getting married, having a kid, or time travel. And well, that's it. All of the second season's routes are weird in some way, and Yukine's route clearly takes the cake for oddest adaptation process. There isn't much notable about her VN route. It does finally give a lore explanation for the balls of light the player had been collecting all game, and given the VN's thematic focus on change, I find it interesting Yukine is a rare static character. Her character arc took place before Okazuki met her. That's also a sign this route is, well, kind of boring in the VN, as it lacks the central conflict or plot direction other routes have. There's no drama club, student council election, or sibling drama. Not only does it make the narrative less dynamic, it makes the romantic elements painfully generic. Unlike those other routes which could tie romantic progression to dramatic plot moments, Okazuki and Yukine kind of just hang out killing time in the same room until they conveniently fall for each other. That's not to say the route's without value, or that the anime didn't lose anything by taking a more bombastic approach. There's a consistent focus in the VN on how society stereotypes those who don't fit in, and how they can turn good-hearted individuals into delinquents, as well as a compelling relationship dynamic in the way Okazuki attempts to figure out why Yukine does what she does, before deciding he needs to be the one to support her. It's not bad writing, but it's subtle, and the stakes are downright mundane, especially compared to the anime. And this too matches how the anime's adapted prior routes. Nuance, motivation, and character depth is removed to instead focus on stronger, but simpler emotions and create a more immediately compelling scene. Instead of VN Yukine's subdued pain acknowledging the death of her brother, we get a more immediately compelling but less complex expression of anguish at the city's needless violence. And if you're a fan of the former writing, you could use this to criticize the anime's decision to radically restructure this route. But based on the prior adaptations, it seems like that's just KyoAni's MO. It's not like they could have adapted the romantic elements anyways, and the removal of Yukine's ditziness during her first appearance convinces me we weren't getting the VN's level of nuance regardless of how they handled the plot. But it's not to undersell how weird it is that the anime invents a plot whole cloth for these two episodes. You definitely notice. I don't want to undersell KyoAni's genius at adaptation. Plenty of crappy VN to anime adaptations prove it isn't an easy process, but the drop in plot consistency during these episodes demonstrates the massive advantage the anime has working off an existing story. Instead of getting to refine and improve on the VN's existing plotline, it now has to build a plot from the ground up, And while the results aren't awful, we do get some seriously head-scratching contrivances, tonal inconsistencies, and scenarios that just seem incongruous from Clanad's other content. But what saves these episodes is KyoAni cranking everything else up to 11. The animation is immaculate, the callbacks to other routes are meaningful and perfectly placed, and the writing within each scene is often effective and emotionally resonant. It's an odd contrast that makes me think the larger writing issues weren't due to a lack of time, and that the differing qualities of episodes is instead a reflection of KyoAni's strengths and weaknesses as a studio at the time. And the result is pretty strong episodes. Despite the conflict being a little over the top and emotionally simple, I have to admit its ending got me, even if it's a more cliché reveal than the VN's emotionally realistic lead up to the grave visit. It may not be the anime's best content, but I much prefer it to the time-crunched, largely uncreative adaptation of Misae route. And while Yukine fans might disagree, between these episodes and her prior cameos, it feels like Yukine has gotten a relatively thorough adaptation. But the need for net new content in the first place reminds me of the question I had when seeing Misae's rush route. Why is the anime adapting this content in the first place instead of jumping directly to AfterStory? Why waste such impressive animation on this instead of devoting the runtime and talent on the clearly more important AfterStory route? Because as we'll see in my next video, there's tons of great VM moments the existing anime had to cut or skip past. Which takes me to my conclusion as a whole. Wait, what was that? There's still one more route the anime adapted we need to discuss? Really? Oh, yeah, you'll have to forgive me for forgetting this was the anime at all, since there's not even an arc in that version, just scattered bits of adapted content. That's right, I'm talking about the ever-forgotten Komura route is weird. Have I already used that as an opener? Well, this time I'm referring to the structure of the original VN route. Even in the VN it has by far the least unique content, less than even the optional baseball route, and like Fuko branches off Nagisa route, but much later on and much less expectedly. To start down this serious sensei's route, you need to lose the drama club's basketball game. But before we get to that, I do want to mention a unique bit of pre-game content you'll likely run into during this playthrough. During your path down both Nagisa and Komura routes, Okazuki will run into Ibuki at the Furukawa bakery and learn about Fuko's condition. I even mentioned this in my Nagisa route video, but if you just completed Fuko route, something changes, with both Okazuki and Nagisa discussing how close Fuko feels and how they wish to spend time with her despite having never met her. Like with Misae and Tomoya route, it's an example of the VN character's occasional cross-route consciousness, where despite the diverging timelines we see characters influenced by the content of parallel arcs, and in this case it leads to Okazuki wishing for Fuko's recovery from the bottom of his heart. This results in us actually losing a ball of light, with Okazuki noticing emerging from his palm and floating away. It's this wish that assumingly explains how Fuko wakes up in AfterStory, and if you're worried about being down a light ball, don't be. This is required to later get both Ibuki sisters' balls of light, a shrewd 2-for-1 investment on Okazuki's part. But as mentioned, this can occur during either Nagisa or Komura route depending on your completion order. The actual point of divergence is losing the drama club's basketball match. This leads to the group becoming understandably depressed, but Nagisa wanting them to all still find ways to enjoy their time at school. We learn Okazuki and Nagisa shared an off-screen Founders Festival before, just like in every other route, she falls sick. It's here we get the first major moments of the route, as Ibuki again appears at the bakery as Okazuki visits. She says goodbye, explaining she's moving to be closer to Fuko's hospital, before mentioning that Komura-sensei is retiring at the end of the year. And if you've already played through Fuko route, it shouldn't be a surprise that Ibuki's in touch with Komura. Even the VN route includes Ibuki gushing with respect over the more experienced teacher. Here she reveals Komura was telling her about his last 2 students, who she confirms are, of course, Okazuki and Sunohara. Ibuki continues to explain some VN-exclusive backstory, revealing that until 6 years ago, Komura was a strict but supportive teacher at the town's rough industrial high school, assuming the one referenced in Tomoya route, whose one rule is that every student had to make it to graduation, believing that to do otherwise would lead to a failing mindset when the student entered the real world. She continues to explain our main cast school is so well behaved he had nothing to do the last 6 years, until he ran into Sunohara and Okazuki. We then cut to the delinquent duo talking in the dorms, where Okazuki drops his hypothesis that Komura intentionally introduced them to each other so they'd have a reason to come to school and not drop out. We heard a similar hypothesis at the end of VN May's route, but this time Suno doesn't immediately buy it, although notably he's the one to make the observation they probably would have been expelled without Komura's interference in the anime. The route next jumps to graduation, oddly totally ignoring Nagisa even if she's dating Okazuki, explaining Okazuki spent his winter job hunting while Suno returned home to look for work. Content somewhat mirrored the montage in episode 9, before just like a Nagisa route we meet the 2 boys skipping their graduation ceremony. And it's here that anime finally adapts something from this route, as in both versions Komura appears, revealing for the first time in the anime that he's retiring. We had some additional back and forth about Nagisa and the drama club in the anime, before in both versions Okazuki asked Komura point blank why he paired him and Suno up. But as we've previously seen, the anime absolutely cannot write for Komura, so all he has to say is, I forgot. It doesn't even come off as teasing, it's just sad. But in the VN he actually honors Okazuki's question, confirming Ibuki's thesis as he notes that he values all his students as if they were his own children, but his school students were so good he had nothing to do. VN Okazuki thanks him for his support and his surprisingly optimistic affirmation promises to lead excellent lives despite not going to college. It's here the anime pair bows at Komura, while in the VN we instead cut to the crowd of gathered students exiting school, mobbed by advisors and teachers offering congratulations. Only Komura is alone, and the pair run over to deliver deep bows of appreciation, Okazuki's internal monologue confirming they never display such deep gratitude towards any other authority figure. Reminding us of how great his VN incarnation is, we get a final snarky exchange as Komura chides Sunohara for being unreasonable when he tells the old sensei to not die before we do. There's a final flashback to Okazuki talking with Ibuki and that's it, although I do have to mention one of Clanad's side story's most heartwarming arcs that reveals retired Komura's children are often too busy for him, but every holiday is filled with hundreds of cards from the ex-students he helped graduate, including one from the full Okazuki family. And yeah, compared to everything else, this barely counts as a route. The anime adaptation consists of all of a single scene. Still, in the VN it's a touching backstory for one of the most charismatic side characters, and given all the great Komura dialogue the anime has already removed, it's no surprise it cut everything it could from this route. Seriously, if you haven't seen my other videos, you have to check out the VN's Fuko route. Komura has such great witty banter with Okazuki, it'll make the anime's generic old man unrecognizable. And after all that, Suno repairing his relationship with his sister, Misae remembering her past, Yukine stopping a gang war, Komura retiring, what's changed? The side arcs adapted in the first season certainly slowed the pace down, but that was while the narrative was still ramping up. Now we're smack in between the conclusion of Nagisa route and the beginning of the much anticipated AfterStory content. The sudden swerve into unrelated side stories is a much more noticeable de-escalation of our central narrative now. After following Nagisa's route for the majority of the first season, we finally got a dramatic confession that resulted in our main couple going out. How is this going to change the relationship? Where are they going to go from here? And the second season absolutely wrecks the pacing by entirely ignoring these questions. Apparently going out changed effectively nothing about the relationship, which feels downright unromantic during most of these episodes. And while Kazu gets some development during these episodes, our main girl becomes suddenly sidelined, getting zero development and being largely relegated to statically standing around. While some of the blame lies on the individual episode writing, the reality is that our main pair in their relationship is being held hostage. Because in the VN they jump directly from the end of the play to Nagisa falling sick, meaning when the anime eventually adapts to latter content in episode 9, both the characters in their relationship need to be in exactly the same place it was during the school play. So despite 8 whole episodes, learning magic exists and surviving a gang war, our anime pair can't change or grow during the stretch of episodes for fear their characters will diverge too much from their VN counterparts when the narrative eventually has to sync back up. The first season did the same, shoving other routes in the middle of Nagisa arc, but not only was it incorporated better, still reserving time to develop our main couple and create a slow burn romance, the slower pace of the early episodes made it a less noticeable addition compared to now, at the route's conclusion. Let's say you're a Yukine stan and couldn't care less about Nagisa. Do these episodes do the characters they adapt justice? Were these episodes worth it for them, even if it does derail our main plot? Well, the placement of these episodes is a detriment to that as well. Unlike the first season's side routes, we're at a point where these side characters are effectively never going to appear again, which combined with the fact their content isn't allowed to make any lasting impact on our main pair makes their inclusions feel largely pointless. It doesn't help that the most developed side characters in the anime, the Drama Club, are largely ignored during these episodes. Even the focus characters don't get a great showing. With such short routes, the anime characters lack the depth of their original incarnations, reduced down to only the most obvious characteristics and cliches. Despite the mundane plot, VN Yukine gets to be complex. She's ditzy, spontaneous, accommodating, a bit of a bookworm, introspective, outspoken about her beliefs, flustered, smitten, a bit devious, sorrowful. Anime Yukine is only allowed to be either accommodating or sad. And I think we complained enough about Misae and Komura's anime treatment to communicate that they suffer the same fate. Only the Sunohara siblings are largely spared, probably due to their route's plot requiring more complex emotions. It's not like the anime hasn't done this before. I criticize it for doing the same with Kotomi and our main couple, but our Yukine Misae Komura trio don't get the same anime magic in return. If anything, Okazuki benefits the most from the added animation. As a result, the episodes go by so quickly and are so unrelated to the wider plot or cast, you'll have likely forgotten about them even a few episodes into AfterStory proper. Not an outcome that does the focus characters proper justice, even if you're a fan. So what else do these episodes accomplish then? Set up and lore dump about the Balls of Light? Technically yes, but it's an inefficient delivery. KyoAni is absolutely capable of remixing the required explanations into a single episode instead of 4. Okay, well, what about the themes and messages of these routes? Maybe the plots don't connect to our overarching narrative, but do the side routes help develop the story's thematic throughline? Maybe. The anime smartly connects Misae and Yukine routes to a shared discussion of sibling bonds, but it's not something that gets expanded on before or after their episodes. Yukine routes themes of family bonds, something which does relate to the series' wider messages, is smartly tied to Okazuki's strained relationship with his father. The route doesn't really expand on this, it just briefly brings it up before pivoting to its main gang war related conflict, which obviously doesn't have much overlap with the series' other thematic content. For reference, the VN route's also pretty standalone, really only tying into the work's larger themes of family during the funeral, but at least connects to shared themes of social rejection, which the anime entirely ignores during both this and prior routes. Compared to the prior 2 routes, Misae's arc has arguably the most connections to the larger plot. Her backstory mirrors Okazuki's arc in AfterStory, with a stable relationship being ripped tragically away, repaired via light balls only after years of isolation. But outside of similar plot points and some overlapping ideas of loss and perseverance, the VN doesn't really do much with this parallel, meaning the anime's much more rushed rendition totally ignores this potential connection. So what's left then? I can't understate how fantastic the jump in animation quality has been from the first season. I mean, these are all the same person as this. But was the effort really best spent here, instead of using on later, more relevant, higher impact plot points? We'll of course go over all this in my next video, but despite already being a masterpiece, there's so much fantastic content in AfterStory the anime leaves unadapted. You can only imagine the emotional and thematic weight KyoAni's fantastic animation could have added to those scenes if it adapted them, instead of spending so much time on these throwaway episodes. But despite my opinion that the effort would have been better spent elsewhere, these episodes of course aren't worthless. There's some moments we wouldn't have gotten otherwise, and I'm sure fans of these side characters enjoyed seeing them in the anime spotlight. If anyone was personally a fan of these episodes, I'd honestly be interested to know in the comments below what stood out to you in these anime arcs. Am I missing something due to my preference for Okazuki and Nagisa's overarching narrative? But if I'm going to give a hard-ass conclusion, here it is. Baseball Route's a great reintroduction to the world and wider cast, even if that could be around for much longer. Huge thumbs up. Miura also gets to stay, although maybe it could have been incorporated in the first season instead. Misae Route absolutely gets the axe. I love the VN content, but 2 episodes just can't do it justice. The time would have been better served helping fill out AfterStory or any of the other rushed routes. Yukine Route, I can take or leave. Its pacing is fine, and while it doesn't do a great job of adapting the VN content, I wasn't hugely impressed with that version either. It's a wash for me either way. Komura Route takes up so little time it's hardly worth mentioning. While if the anime was a little more faithful to his character from the start, it would have been nice to give him a couple more minutes. It's just a shame what they did to him. And man, isn't that a weight off my chest. 4, maybe 5 routes down in a single video. Which of course means the only thing left is what you've all been looking forward to. What inspired this comparison in the first place and what I've been most excited to talk about. Because while it might not be as noticeable as with Yukine's route, KyoAni takes some serious liberties with AfterStory, both to the benefit and detriment of the narrative. So join me one last time as we break down how the anime adapted the VN's largest and most iconic route, as we reach the final conclusion of Okazuki and Nagisa's long, long journey. Also, Fuko comes back.